Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere very hot, very dry, and surprisingly chill, if you know where to stand. Imagine it's high noon in the ancient Persian plateau. The sun is hanging overhead like it's got something personal against you. The earth beneath your sandals feels like baked clay, because it is baked clay, and the only breeze you feel is the one your own sighs stir up. The stone walls around you shimmer with trapped heat. Your tunic clings to your back. And yet, just past a carved wooden door, you step inside, and the air shifts. It's cool. Not cold, not modern AC cold, but just cool enough to make you forget you were sweating a second ago. You breathe in and notice, faintly, rose water. And no, you're not hallucinating from dehydration. You've just walked into a house cooled by clay pipes and wind towers, engineered hundreds of years before electricity was even a rumor. You probably wouldn't survive this place long, by the way. Between the climate, the dress code, and the highly judgmental tea rituals, you'd collapse within an hour. But let's pretend you're just visiting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a narrow alleyway in an ancient Persian city. Maybe Yazd, maybe an older town now long buried beneath centuries of dust. The homes around you rise like sandcastles built to last. No glass windows, no neon signs. Just adobe walls the color of faded cinnamon, rising tall to block the unforgiving sun. The air here is still, but not lifeless. It holds stories. A donkey snorts behind a doorway. Somewhere, a child laughs. The heat presses in, but it's an old, familiar heat, like a weighted blanket that everyone just deals with. No one is sprinting. No one is sweating buckets. People move slowly in linen robes the color of milk tea, their heads shaded with wide scarves or straw hats. And yet, you notice, no one's fanning themselves frantically. No one's pouring water on their heads. There's a secret to this stillness. A trick to staying calm in a place where the air could fry an egg on your elbow. This is the heartland of passive cooling. Long before passive was a buzzword in green architecture blogs. The ancient Persians didn't have ductwork or compressors. They had logic, geometry, clay, and wind. What makes this place particularly clever isn't just how they survived the heat. It's how they welcomed it in, studied it, and turned it against itself. The sun may rule the sky, but down here, humans have figured out how to soften its tantrums. You pass a public well. It's deeper than it looks. Just a dark mouth in the ground with a pail tied to a fraying rope. You peer down, and for a moment, the air coming out is cool. It smells of stone, dust, and something ancient. That's your first taste of underground temperature control. Down below, the earth doesn't follow the rules of the upper world. It stays steady, patient, slightly chilled. It's not just water down there, it's potential. Later, you'll meet the Qanat, a marvel of slow-moving water and elegant angles. But for now, just notice how many doors seem to lead downward. Subterranean storage rooms, shade-filled chambers. Even the livestock pens are half sunken into the ground, because even goats appreciate a bit of a temperature break. There's a moment where you feel it, right at the corner of a shaded courtyard. A pocket of moving air. It brushes your face like a lazy cattail. Where did that come from? You look up. There's no fan, no fluttering fabric, just a tall chimney-like structure angled to catch the slightest breeze and funnel it downward. And that's your first encounter with a badger, a windcatcher, one of the signature elements of Persian air conditioning. These towers aren't ornamental, they're directional, intentional, and surprisingly effective. Some face the prevailing wind. Others are strategically positioned to create suction when the wind passes over. Air is pulled down through shafts, past water-soaked surfaces, through clay ducts, and out into living rooms, courtyards, and even underground bedrooms. It's all so slow, and yet weirdly effective. Now, a quick reality check. If you're imagining some flawless system where every house is a magical oasis, pause that fantasy. These methods worked well, but not always. Sandstorms, humidity, changes in elevation all threw off the delicate balance. Historians still argue whether some of the oldest windcatcher designs originated purely from trial and error, or whether they were borrowed from older Egyptian or Babylonian structures and refined here. It's likely a little of both. Inspiration followed trade routes. But what makes Persian architecture stand out isn't just its cleverness, it's the vibe. This wasn't just about cooling, it was about serenity, about living with the landscape instead of wrestling it into submission. You settle onto a low stone bench in someone's shaded courtyard. The walls rise around you like protective arms. Vines curl over trellises. The air smells faintly of clay, mint, and last night's tea. You can hear someone grinding spices in a nearby room. The breeze comes again, gentle, dry, and welcome. Even your bones are beginning to cool now. You pause near a sun-warmed wall, your fingers brushing along its rough surface. Plastered clay, flecked with tiny pebbles, holding on to just a bit of last night's cool. The alley turns and suddenly you're facing a low-arched doorway, leading to what looks like a private residence. No guards, no grand entrance, just a plain wooden door, half open, creaking gently. Inside, it's dim, quiet, and noticeably cooler. A dog lifts its head, sighs, and goes back to sleep. You step cautiously in, drawn by the subtle hum of air and the quiet gurgle of water. You're not in a palace, just a middle-class home in a mid-sized ancient Persian city, but it feels like someone cracked the code for staying sane during summer. What's cooling this place isn't magic, and it's not divine intervention either. It's something called the kanat. Below your sandals, beneath the layers of tiled floor and compacted earth, a miracle is flowing. But this isn't a river, and it's not a sewer. It's a quiet, man-made channel, gently sloping from a distant mountain aquifer, sometimes dozens of kilometers away, delivering fresh water into the city by way of pure gravity. No pumps, no engines, just stone, slope, and stubborn brilliance. You follow the path deeper into the home, toward a courtyard where a small pool ripples lazily in the center. This isn't just for aesthetics. It's a terminal basin for part of the Qanat system. The water here has journeyed through hand-dug tunnels, protected from sunlight the entire way, staying cold like a secret. The Persians built these aqueducts with a kind of reverse logic. Start high, move slow, go deep, and pop up only where absolutely necessary. The air above the pool, noticeably cooler. Not in a dramatic ice blast kind of way, but like the whisper of a cave. And it's no accident. Water evaporation from the basin helps cool the air. Above it, a windcatcher drops the incoming breeze directly onto the surface, creating an early version of an evaporative cooler. One of the family members, maybe the cook, walks past you, balancing a shallow copper tray of herbs. She doesn't react to the heat. She's in rhythm with it. There's a reason these homes were built around these pools, to be the lungs of the house. Moisture helps, but it's also about airflow. The wind from above meets the cool, rising air from below, and if the structure's geometry is just right, a soft current flows through the house like a gentle exhale. You duck through a narrow hallway, carved with intentional angles and archways that confuse direct sunlight but welcome shadow. These people didn't just build with materials, they built with light and air as tools, and under it all, the Qanat hums away. Here's where it gets wild. Some of these Qanats were over 40 kilometers long, dug by hand. Vertical shafts, like wells, were spaced every 20 to 30 meters so workers could descend, dig laterally, and remove soil. It's a bit like dental flossing the earth. Tedious, dusty, and somehow astonishingly accurate. The slope had to be just right. Too steep and the water rushed and eroded. Too flat and it pooled and stagnated. How they got the math right? Historians still argue. Some say they used weighted strings and simple inclinometers. Others claim it was just decades of trial and error with a lot of broken qanats along the way. Whatever the case, it worked. And it still works in some parts of Iran today, thousands of years later. You pause near one of those vertical shafts, this one covered with a stone grate. The air emerging from it is cold enough to make you blink. It smells like minerals and quiet. You think about the workers who built this. Laborers, engineers, maybe slaves, maybe paid craftsmen. Crawling under the desert in candlelight, removing earth one basketful at a time. There's an old Persian saying that water is more valuable than gold. After standing over a qanat shaft in the summer, you start to get it. And the qanat wasn't just for drinking or irrigation, it was the backbone of cooling. The temperature below the surface, especially in desert climates, remains fairly stable year-round, somewhere around 15 to 20 degrees Celsius. By routing air over water or even just through qanat tunnels, engineers could draw that stable, cooler air up into homes, especially when paired with vertical chimneys or windcatchers. This system of underground cool air delivery was one of the earliest examples of what we'd now call geothermal temperature regulation. Sounds fancy, right? But here it's just a Tuesday. Now you enter a Shabastan, a subterranean room, used during the hottest parts of summer, especially for sleeping. There's no candlelight, just patterned holes in the ceiling that let in filtered sunlight from above. The air is cooler. Still, you could fall asleep standing up. In these rooms, the qanat was often exposed, like an open channel running along the edge of the floor. The sound of water, barely a trickle, adds to the sense of peace. And here's the detail you didn't expect. People sometimes stored food down here. Clay jugs of yogurt, fresh herbs, and delicate fruits that would have turned to soup upstairs. A gentle rustle draws your eyes to the corner where a man is adjusting some sort of bamboo screen. He's trying to direct the airflow, angling it to hit the middle of the room. It's subtle, intentional, a quiet daily ritual that says, "Yes, I would like to survive this heat wave with dignity, thank you." You sit. You lean against the wall. You start to understand that these systems weren't just engineering feats, they were philosophies, living with the land, using what the earth gives rather than fighting it. A modern air conditioner whirs, clicks, breaks, and begs for maintenance. But the qanat? It flows. Quietly. Eternally. Or at least until someone builds a highway over it. You stretch your legs a little, still seated in that shaded shabestan, your back resting against cool plaster. A clay water jug sweats faintly beside you, its curved neck dark with condensation. The air drifting in feels almost deliberate now, like the house is gently exhaling in your direction, offering a bit of relief just when you need it. And then you notice something odd. The walls don't just sit there, they breathe. Not literally, of course, but their texture and structure seem to play a role in this soft, regulated atmosphere. This isn't stone or cement or wood, it's adobe. Sun-dried mud bricks mixed with straw, clay, and a bit of patience. It might not sound like the most glamorous building material, but you start to realize it's basically nature's version of memory foam insulation. The adobe walls are thick, like comically thick, sometimes over 2 feet. During the day, they absorb heat slowly, storing it away in their dense, porous structure. At night, when the desert temperature drops, they release it again, radiating warmth into the interior spaces. The result? A kind of gentle indoor temperature curve, smoothing out the highs and lows of the desert's extreme mood swings. You run your hand along the surface of the wall. It's not polished. It feels a little gritty. But the temperature, it's just cool enough to make you forget how hot it was outside. This isn't an accident. It's passive thermal massing. and it's one of the many quiet tools in the Persian architectural toolkit. You wander back into the courtyard, and now your eyes are adjusting to the rhythm of the space. You notice how every opening, every doorway, every window is placed with almost ridiculous care. They're not about letting in light, they're about keeping heat out. Some windows are shaded by wooden lattice screens. Mashrabia, a word borrowed and reshaped by later Islamic architecture. These lattices diffuse the sunlight, allow airflow, and preserve a certain amount of privacy. But more importantly, they filter out harsh rays, letting only softened light fall inside, like a constant sepia-tinted sigh. There's even a rumor whispered between architecture nerds that the patterns of these lattices weren't just decorative, they were tuned in a way to optimize airflow and shadow. Historians still argue whether that's true or just poetic overreach, but either way, the effect is calming. You feel like you're inside a living diagram, one where someone actually thought about how hot your ankles might get around 3 p.m. in late July. You pass under a series of small arched doorways, some barely high enough to make it through without ducking. That's another trick. Small entrances reduce heat gain, and every threshold, every shift between inside and out, is marked by a moment of compression, then expansion. It's like the building is reminding you to exhale, to pause. A cat slinks past your ankles and vanishes behind a cluster of clay pots arranged near a doorway. You peer through the open door and find a small kitchen space. There's no refrigerator, obviously, but the temperature is noticeably cooler than outside. Hanging from the ceiling is a zir, a kind of traditional clay container suspended above a shallow pit. These were ancient pantries, cool, dry, and ingeniously ventilated. And then you spot something even more curious. Small vents near the ceiling, narrow, tubular things, some angled downward, others upward. These are the tandai or tarayas, small passive airflow shafts designed to channel warm air out and coax cooler air in. And no, they didn't have sensors or thermostats. Just centuries of trial, error, and clay craftsmanship. Back in the courtyard, a man in simple linen clothing is watering the base of a climbing vine. He doesn't splash or pour, just a quiet trickle from a clay pot. The plant's purpose isn't just beauty. It shades the wall behind it, creating what's called a green buffer zone. Ancient passive cooling's version of an exterior sun hat. As the sun begins to lower just a little in the sky, you finally realize something. This isn't just about one tool, it's about how all of them work together. The thick adobe walls keep the temperature steady. The windcatchers guide air down through the house. The qanats bring cool water that can be routed beneath floors or pooled for evaporative cooling. And the home's layout itself, central courtyard, shaded rooms, small openings, forms a kind of orchestra, with airflow as the music. Even the rooftops, which you haven't visited yet, are part of the equation. Flat and accessible, they serve as sleeping spaces in summer, open to the night air, cooled by breezes, and free from the baked daytime heat trapped below. The cumulative effect is that you forget you're in a desert. Not completely, but enough to function, enough to breathe easily, enough to sit in a shaded room with a clay cup of water and think, maybe modern air conditioning is kind of overrated. Now, let's be clear. These systems had limits. When the wind died, so did the breeze indoors. Humid days, rare in Persia but not impossible, reduced the effectiveness of evaporative cooling. And not every home had access to a qanat. These were community projects maintained with cooperation and long-term thinking, two things not always in abundant supply. Still, the sheer elegance of it all feels, well, boring in the best way. No roaring machines, no thermostat debates, just a deep understanding of environment, materials, and human comfort. You lean back against the cool adobe wall again. The cat is snoring. A breeze slides across the courtyard. And for just a second, you think, this isn't just survival. You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, just drifted. For a moment beneath the same courtyard fig tree, your back still pressed to the cool adobe wall. Overhead, a few leaves shift as a breeze finds its way down. A soft creak above you catches your attention. It's the long neck of a windcatcher or badger, yawning into the sky like an oversized chimney designed by a sleepy genie. And yes, now we're getting into the heart of ancient Persian air conditioning, the windcatcher. You stand and squint up at it. Towering above the roofline, the bodgear is a boxy vertical shaft, maybe octagonal, maybe square, maybe even with fancy stone carvings if the owner had flair. Its job? Pretty simple, actually. It catches wind. Specifically the kind that comes sweeping across the Persian plateau with an attitude. It traps that moving air, channels it down its hollow interior, and directs it into the rooms below. But like all things Persian and clever, it doesn't just blast air, it modulates, slows, curves. Think of it less as a fan and more like a wise old camel whispering, patience. You climb narrow stairs, probably not built for comfort, judging by the steepness, and emerge onto the rooftop. From here, you see half a dozen windcatchers dotting the skyline like tall, whispering elders. Each one is angled differently, tuned to catch prevailing winds from a specific direction. Some even have internal baffles, stone slats placed inside the tower to direct airflow depending on the wind's mood that day. You lean over the edge and feel the air being drawn down, cooler, gentler, like standing beside a friendly vacuum cleaner. This is where form meets function. Even on windless days, a well-built windcatcher can still create movement through the magic of thermal differences. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. If you build your structure to honor that simple truth, the air practically flows itself. Now peek down into the house from here. The air being pulled into the home travels across shaded hallways, maybe even across one of those indoor water basins, further cooling it. And then, just as it starts to warm again, the airflow finds an exit vent, either another badger or a passive chimney, and escapes. Out with the warm, in with the cool. And here's a detail your HVAC technician probably won't offer you. Many badgers included damp reed screens at their base. As incoming air passed through these screens, the water evaporated, chilling the breeze even further. Natural, simple, effective, and possibly also a great mosquito deterrent, though historians still argue whether that was the intent or a bonus side effect. Some wealthier homes even had multiple windcatchers, strategically placed on opposing sides. On breezy days, the wind would enter one tower and exit through the other, creating a cross-ventilation loop that refreshed the air continuously. No humming, no filters to change. Just clay, geometry, and centuries of practice. But let's zoom out a bit. You're not just standing on any roof, you're looking out over a dense, sun-bleached city, maybe Yazd, maybe an earlier, dustier ancestor, where this system of passive cooling is everywhere. The entire skyline is a forest of chimneys, but none of them are for smoke. They're for wind. Even the layout of the city obeys these principles. Streets are narrow and angled with high walls that shade each other. This doesn't just block sunlight, it helps funnel wind. Alleyways act like wind tunnels, channeling airflow into homes with the precision of a race car engineer who's had too much saffron tea. You walk along the roof's edge, taking in how flat everything is. Flat roofs weren't just construction conveniences, they were used. Families slept up here in summer. Conversations happened up here. You imagine someone lighting a lamp, brewing tea, and telling a quiet story while stars emerged overhead. All while enjoying the fruits of a passive system that required no switches, no power, just a deep understanding of how air wants to move. And still, they pushed further. In some larger buildings, palaces, caravansaries, mosques, The windcatchers were integrated with underground storage chambers called sardabs. These were cool rooms often connected directly to qanats or cisterns, where perishables could be stored and people could retreat during the fiercest midday heat. And that's where you're going next. Back downstairs, through a side corridor and past a stone threshold, you descend into a sardab. The temperature drops immediately. It's not chilly like a refrigerator, it's calm. The air is heavier, slower. Quiet enough that you can hear your own breath. On one wall, shelves hold clay jugs of milk, cheese, and pickled vegetables, kept fresh by centuries-old physics. The air here isn't still. It's moving, but gently. Just enough to keep the room breathable to prevent that awful, trapped feeling you get in sealed, modern basements. That's the windcatcher again. Still working for you even in the dark. A man in the distance rearranges pottery. He doesn't rush. No one does in this heat. The building does the work, so you don't have to. You find a low bench and sit. This, you realize, is the genius of Persian air cooling. Not to conquer heat, but to collaborate with it. To anticipate it. To negotiate a truce where you both get what you want, you some relief, the heat somewhere else to be, and still no electricity, just wind, clay, water, and a deep culturally ingrained respect for living in balance with the land. You close your eyes for a moment. The wind above sighs through its tall clay channel. The water in the qanat murmurs softly beneath your feet. And for a place designed to manage heat, it's kind of perfect for sleep too. The sardab fades behind you as you step back into the world of daylight and dust. But now that you've walked the shaded halls, leaned into the breeze from a badgir, and tasted the cool hush of a subterranean room, you're starting to notice the invisible choreography of this whole place. It's not just about airflow or architecture anymore, it's about rhythm. The ancient Persian home doesn't fight the sun, it dances with it. And nowhere is that more apparent than in how these homes and the lives inside them follow the sun's daily journey across the sky. The Persians had an uncanny sense of solar timing. Every room, window, arch, and overhang in the traditional home was placed with the sun's arc in mind. You step into another small room, one tucked into the east side of the house. This was the Zemistan Nation, or winter sitting room. Low ceiling, thick walls, south-facing windows to catch the weak winter sun. It was the spot where morning tea tasted warmer, and old joints ached just a bit less. Now, circle around to the opposite side, the west-facing spaces, and you'll find rooms designed for the opposite. Resisting heat, not welcoming it. The Tabastan Nation, or summer-sitting room, hides from the sun like a cat behind a curtain. Smaller windows, deeper shadows, and thick curtains made of woven reed or wool, dampened slightly on the hottest days. You can almost feel how heavy the air is with intention. You run your fingers along one such curtain, and it rustles faintly, as if agreeing with your thoughts. But let's zoom in even more. You find a decorative arch above one of the doorways. Not a big one. Modest. But if you stand at just the right angle in the late afternoon, a beam of light lands right on it, like a cosmic spotlight hitting its cue. This wasn't just for flair, these were passive sundials built into the bones of the house. They helped people tell time, mark seasons, even decide when to move from one part of the house to another. Because yes, people here migrated daily. Not through countries or cities, but through rooms. In the cooler seasons, families might gather near sunlit terraces in the morning, then move to more protected inner rooms at midday. In summer, they'd shift to deeper shaded spaces or nap in the sardab before ascending to the breezy roof after sunset. A home here was never static. It breathed, it flexed, and so did its inhabitants. You, dear time traveler, are now part of that slow drift. Now step back out into the courtyard. That tree you saw earlier? It's casting long shadows now, and those shadows are part of the design. Trees, climbing vines, and trellised flowers weren't just for beauty, they were precision instruments for managing heat. With deciduous trees in just the right spots, sunlight could be blocked in summer and welcomed in winter depending on the season. And let's talk about that tree a little more because it's probably not just any tree, it's likely a pomegranate or fig, two beloved staples of Persian gardens, both beautiful and practical. The pomegranate's dense leaves offer heavy shade, its fruit refreshing hydration. You reach up and pluck one, already split from the heat. Inside, a spill of ruby seeds. Sweet, astringent, almost cold in your hand somehow. Even the flooring underfoot is part of the equation. Many traditional Persian homes featured porous stone or unglazed tiles and key walkways, materials that absorbed moisture from nighttime irrigation and released it slowly during the day, subtly cooling the air at ankle height. It's the kind of detail you wouldn't think to appreciate until your ankles are quietly grateful. As the late afternoon deepens, more of the house slips into shadow. The corridors seem to sigh in relief. You watch as an old man in simple robes moves through the space, slowly pulling woven curtains across the west-facing rooms. It's an unspoken ritual, performed not out of habit, but with a kind of seasonal wisdom that says, the sun has done its part, now let the house do the rest. You follow him up to the rooftop again, where bedding is being unrolled. Mats, cushions, and thin blankets are spread out under the open sky. Children chase each other between laundry lines. A copper kettle whistles from a corner stove and the smell of cardamom tea floats up. And then comes one of the strangest, most wonderful moments of the day, the thermal flip. As the sun sets, the desert begins to release the heat it stored. The air cools quickly. The walls, earlier sun-warmed, now start to radiate that stored energy back out. You touch the edge of the parapet. It's still warm, like the last ember of a fire. But soon it'll cool too. Above you, stars begin to emerge, pricking holes in the soft blue dusk. There's no need for a clock. The shift is in the air itself. And here's where the Persian home truly excels. Not just in keeping you cool, but in guiding you gently from one temperature, one rhythm, one part of the day to the next. No jarring AC hum, no digital displays. Just shade, wind, clay, and centuries of listening to the land. You lie down on a rooftop mat. The windcatchers are still turning their slow, soundless ballet. A pot of tea clinks softly in the corner, and you think, this place isn't ancient, it's timeless. You awaken, if you were even truly asleep, beneath a soft blanket, the kind woven from goat's wool and just scratchy enough to remind you that you're still, technically, awake. The stars above you are no longer just a handful. They're a ceiling. The kind of ceiling that makes you forget where you came from, or what a thermostat even does. From your rooftop perch, the city is hushed, but not dead. Not lifeless, it's resting. The kind of sleep that feels earned. You hear the low mutter of someone down the lane, the clang of a teapot lid, and the gentle flapping of a cotton curtain catching the midnight breeze. And you're not the only one up here. Across the flat rooftops of this city, maybe Yazd again, maybe another older, dustier cousin, you can see families tucked beneath blankets, lone sleepers curled into corners, someone idly smoking a water pipe and watching the moon. This is Persian rooftop culture, and it's not a side effect of architecture, it's a feature. See, when the daytime heat makes enclosed rooms unbearable, the roof becomes the bedroom, the social lounge, the place for dreams. There are no screens, no beeping appliances, just the endless sky and the slow, predictable rotation of constellations. You roll onto your side, the blanket shifting. The surface beneath you is kavir tiles, a traditional kind of baked clay that stays warm just long enough to keep the chill off your bones before surrendering all its heat to the stars. It's not just peaceful up here, it's structured. Some homes have built-in windbreaks, low parapets to block gusts while allowing heat to dissipate. Others have cloth awnings or bamboo slat roofs that filter starlight but still let air flow. And then there's the quiet choreography of sleeping arrangements. Elders near the stairwell, kids clustered toward the corners, the best view reserved for the insomniac poet in the family. Because you know there's always one. You hear someone a few rooftops over laughing softly, probably telling a bedtime story, or reciting a couplet, or just complaining about the price of apricots. Everything up here is slower, more deliberate. Even conversations feel like they've been cooled by the windcatcher. And here's the twist. Sleeping on the roof wasn't just for summer. In shoulder seasons, those transition times when the earth hasn't quite decided what it's doing yet, families would use the roof for late dinners, naps, or tea gatherings under the moon, even if they weren't sleeping up there. You imagine sitting cross-legged with a bowl of pistachios and some sour cherry juice, listening to someone tell a centuries-old story. Maybe about a prince who tried to trap the wind in a bottle, or a grandmother who claimed her windcatcher had a personality of its own, moody but polite. And now that you're thinking about it, windcatchers do feel a bit like household spirits, always humming, always adjusting, responding not just to temperature but to moods. A home with a broken windcatcher is like a violin missing a string. It still stands, but the music's gone. You peer over the edge of the rooftop again. The narrow alley below is bathed in silver moonlight. A cat weaves between clay pots. Somewhere, water trickles. A conat, probably, still whispering under the earth. The coolness of the night air makes your fingers ache pleasantly, and you realize you haven't missed modernity once. Let's talk a bit more about nighttime cooling, the unsung hero of Persian thermal design. It's not just about breezes, it's about radiative cooling. That's when surfaces exposed to the clear night sky actually lose heat faster than they gain it. Clay rooftops, for example, radiate their warmth out into the cosmos, cooling the interior rooms below them by dawn. Historians still argue whether the Persians fully understood this mechanism in modern terms, but the evidence suggests they knew enough. After all, they built their lives around it. There were even early forms of ice pits, or yakchols, that relied on this very principle, exposing shallow pools to the open night sky where the water would freeze even when daytime temperatures were warm. Imagine that, making ice in the desert with no electricity, just geometry, physics, and a very stubborn kind of optimism. But even without ice, rooftop sleep culture was its own kind of luxury. Children would fall asleep counting stars. Parents would whisper until one voice faded into a snore. Stray dogs curled up in shadowed corners. The city itself exhaled, and in the morning, everything shifted again. So here you are, somewhere between night and day. The rooftop beneath you, cooling like baked bread left on a windowsill. The air no longer moving but resting. Even the wind has curled up somewhere for a nap. And you? You're tucked into a tradition so old it doesn't need explaining. A roof isn't just a cover, it's a cradle. You stir gently as the first amber threads of dawn creep across the rooftop. The sky hasn't yet decided on a color, still torn between indigo and rose. But the chill in the air is lifting. Somewhere, a rooster overcommits. Somewhere else, a sleepy kettle sputters to life. Below you, the house is also waking, but it's not a jolt. It's a stretch, a yawn. Ancient Persian homes knew that mornings required softness, not sirens. You sit up, blanket still wrapped around your shoulders like a lazy cloak. Around you, rooftops flicker with quiet life. A boy untangles a rope from a pulley. A woman stretches her arms to the sky. A kettle whistles. And beneath all this, the house begins its daily breath. Exhale warmth from the night, inhale the new day. Time to descend, quietly, slowly down the staircase, back into the heart of the house. As you step, your bare feet touch the clay tiles that have cooled overnight. They're still releasing that nighttime freshness, gifting the house one last breath of calm before the sun climbs higher. And here's the part no one talks about. The Persians were obsessed with transition. It wasn't just about hot and cold, it was about moving between them gracefully. The homes were designed not just to control the climate, but to choreograph your experience of it. Now you're back in the Sardab, the basement room we explored earlier. Its walls are still cool. The air here is heavier, slower. You imagine someone tiptoeing in to sip morning tea, grateful that the house is smarter than any weather forecast. But today, we're not just sitting, we're moving water. Follow the gentle path of an ancient qanat, those underground channels we glimpsed before. You step into a narrow passageway tucked behind the courtyard, just wide enough for a person and a bucket. The sound of trickling water leads you to a house, a small decorative pool, which, if you're lucky, is part of your courtyard. But this isn't just decoration. This is thermal strategy in a fancy outfit. The house is filled with cool water, piped in by the qanat. The surface ripples in a pattern only the morning breeze understands. If you dip your fingers in, the temperature is startling, like a bite of cucumber straight from the fridge. And that water isn't just sitting there for your toes or your koi fish, it's actively cooling the space. Evaporation, my friend. That old magic trick. Historians still debate whether the positioning of these pools was always intentional for climate, or sometimes more aesthetic, but function and beauty rarely separated in Persian design. If it looked pretty, it probably also kept you from melting. And then there were the clay pipes, your main characters in this sleepy epic. Invisible now, but essential then, these pipes crisscross the walls and floors of wealthier homes. Part of the Sardab system, part of the qanat delivery network, they carried cold water to unexpected places. Under floor tiles, behind plaster walls, sometimes even to stone seats in shaded alcoves. Imagine sitting on a chilled stone bench on a 100-degree day. Now imagine inventing that bench 2,500 years ago. You trace a finger along a wall. Cool, not because of any AC vent, but because water, running quietly through a clay pipe behind it, draws away the heat. There's no noise, no hum, just balance. You glance up. That ceiling vent from the badger above is still doing its job. And down here in this belly of earth and water, the two systems meet. Wind and flow, air and trickle, all designed to meet each other like two dancers mid-spin. Back in the courtyard, someone has begun sweeping. The rhythmic shvashv of a palm broom across tile adds a beat to the morning air. A silver tray appears near the house, bearing a small glass of tea, a saucer of dates, and a slice of fresh bread still warm from the tandoor oven. You sit, you sip. You breathe in cardamom and sun. The sun itself is higher now, sharp, uncompromising. But the house doesn't flinch. Its arms of shade stretch wider. Its corridors darken protectively. Curtains get drawn. Reed mats are misted. Even the dog lying in the corner seems to know. Time to retreat. And so you follow suit into a deeper room, where the walls are thick, the air cool, and the clay pipes behind them hum a tune only the bricks can hear. It's strange, isn't it? That with no electricity, no motors, no apps, a house could do this. Could sense your needs and respond. Could usher you through a scorching summer morning with nothing but water, wind, and time-tested stubbornness. You lean back against a stone bench. The water trickles somewhere behind your head. A breeze snakes in from a half-shuttered window, and you start to understand what the ancients knew. Comfort doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to flicker or beep or wake you up with a ding. Sometimes real comfort is a clay pipe hidden in a wall, carrying the quiet cold across centuries. The sun outside climbs like it has something to prove. You feel it press against the outer walls of the house like an impatient guest. But inside, things stay steady. Thick mud brick walls and clever airflow hold the line. You don't sweat. You glide. You're lounging now in a shaded alcove, sipping something tart and cool, maybe sour cherry syrup and water or a minty sharbat. Across the courtyard, a woman fans herself lazily with a palm frond. The house exhales another breeze, this time courtesy of a well-placed wind tunnel that channels cooler air from the shaded north side. Now let's wander through the bigger picture, the architecture of temperature. Because Persian homes weren't just about keeping cool, they were about how everything worked together to create microclimates, like your own personal weather bubble. You notice the house isn't a block. It's a maze of deliberate asymmetry. Courtyards here, overhangs there, an irregular window that looks too small to be decorative but is placed just so to catch the draft from a narrow alley. That's not a mistake. That's science disguised as a nap. Take the Ivans, open, vaulted porches on the shady side of the house. You step into one and it's like walking into a refrigerated dream. The curved ceiling draws hot air upward, while the floor, cooled by the clay below, sighs into your feet. You stretch out on a woven mat, head pillowed by rolled fabric, and understand immediately why entire Persian afternoons disappeared in these spaces. And we haven't even talked about zoning yet. No, not the bureaucratic kind. The home itself is zoned. Hot areas, cool areas, transitional chambers. Each space is like a different room in a thermal symphony. Want to nap? Sardab. Want to eat? Courtyard? Want to do nothing in particular but feel clever about it? Ivan. Modern architects still argue whether these spatial divisions evolved out of necessity or tradition. But let's face it, nothing born out of desperation ends up this elegant by accident. There's intent here. Centuries of people quietly agreeing, let's not sweat if we don't have to. You hear the call to prayer drift through the heat. It echoes off the mud brick like a pebble dropped in honey. There's no rush, no burst of motion, just slow, respectful shifts. Someone folds a mat, another person covers the tea. The city moves like molasses on purpose, because speed generates heat, and that's strictly against house policy. Your eyes wander to the walls again. The color isn't accidental. Most Persian homes are earth-toned. Beige, sand, straw, rosemud. Those hues don't just look pretty in golden hour light. They reflect heat, or rather, they don't absorb it, the way modern black rooftops do. And then there are the plants. Oh, the plants. Everywhere. Creeping up trellises, hanging from clay pots, casting little shadow plays across stone. Thermal landscaping, you might call it today. But for Persians, it was just common sense. If you can't cool the air, shade it. If you can't shade it, scent it. Jasmine, basil, pomegranate, all of them working double shifts, beautifying the home, filtering the air, and gently lowering temperatures by just a hair or two. You pluck a fig from a nearby tree, still warm from the sun, but sweet as sleep. You bite in, and the juice runs down your wrist. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a ceiling pipe gurgles contentedly. And now, a little history snack. Did you know that during the Safavid period, wealthy merchants actually competed over who had the coolest home? Not metaphorically, the literal lowest temperature wins. Guests would marvel over how a rival's sardab was so chilly it made your bones ring. Some even bragged that their windcatcher could bend spoons, though historians still argue whether that was fact, poetry, or a side effect of too much fermented yogurt. And that reminds you, food storage. Because you're not the only one the house is keeping cool. Beneath your feet, the sardab doubles as a pantry. Dark, dry, and just breezy enough to keep things fresh. Clay amphorae hold olive oil, pickled garlic, or smoked fish. Dried herbs hang like upside-down chandeliers. A few clever homes had what amounted to air-cooled fridges. Small clay chests buried halfway in the floor with airflow routed from the windcatcher to swirl inside. Not ice cold, but cooler than your average kitchen shelf in a desert. You remember the old phrase, In summer, the Persian house cooks nothing but bread and shade. And it's true. The kitchen fire is a winter beast. In this heat, meals are cold, light, and prepared early. Yogurt with cucumber, rice wrapped in vine leaves, maybe an eggplant dip that's more chilled than spicy. You lay back again, one arm over your eyes. The sound of the kanat, always the kanat, trickles in like a lullaby. And the heat? It's still there. But it's not oppressive. It's accounted for, like an expected guest you've given the good seat so they don't wander. You breathe deep. The house breathes with you. The afternoon light has taken on that thick, golden syrup quality. You know, the kind that slows everything down, softens the shadows, and makes the simplest things, like a cat grooming itself on a window ledge, feel like high art. You've moved inside again, deeper this time, away from the courtyard, into what you might call the thermal core of the house. Now let's get cozy with something most people completely overlook when they imagine ancient homes. Furniture, or rather, the lack thereof. You're reclining on a long cushion against the wall, your head propped up by a firm, bolstered roll. There's no chair, no sofa, no airless upholstery clinging to heat like a secret. Just mats, rugs, and thick woven textiles, light in summer, heavier in winter. The surfaces you touch are soft where they need to be, but they breathe. And that's the point. Heavy furniture traps warmth. Ancient Persians knew this, so they gave it a pass. Instead, the home is flexible, like a good conversation partner. You can stretch out, sit up, lie sideways, or curl into a corner, and the space doesn't mind. In fact, it's made for that. Now glance up. That decorative lattice in the corner? It's not just pretty. It's a mashrabia, a perforated wooden screen that allows air to pass through but shields you from the harshest light. And just beyond it is the next level of passive cooling. Stack effect ventilation. Here's the deal. Hot air rises. We've all heard it. But in Persian architecture, they turned that into a feature, not a bug. The home is designed like a heat chimney. Warm air gets nudged upward and escapes through small vents placed up high, drawing cooler air in from shaded zones or underground channels below. No electricity, no fans. Just the physics of patience. You take another sip of sharbat, and your glass sweats a little onto your fingers. The condensation forms tiny beads that slide, then vanish. The glass itself is modest, thick-walled, maybe even a bit irregular around the rim. Blown glass, handmade. One of those objects that looks older than it is and smarter than you think. And now let's talk about evening prep, because an ancient Persian house was never idle. While you lounge and pretend you're doing something profound, the house is working. Vents are adjusted. Reed mats are unrolled over the floor and lightly sprinkled with water. That's right, water on the floor. Because as it evaporates, it cools the room. Nothing high-tech, just ancient adiabatic cooling happening right under your toes. Historians still argue whether this kind of floor sprinkling was a standardized method or more of a regional tradition. Something urban households did, while rural folks may do with just damp towels and strong opinions. But archaeological evidence points to the practice being widespread enough to consider it part of daily life. Someone enters the room, quietly pulls a curtain across the arched doorway. It's not heavy, just enough to block out some heat and catch a breeze. And if you look closely, you'll see it's made of tightly woven linen soaked in rose water. Now that's luxury. Walking through a door and being greeted by a gentle floral whisper. Your nose catches something else, though, something cooking. It's faint but steady. Bread? Number flatbreads were baked early this morning. This is cooler. Earthier. Lentils, maybe. Or stuffed grape leaves warming slightly on the residual heat of a stone ledge. Nothing is cooking on a blazing fire right now. That would be sacrilege in this heat. The kitchen fire sleeps until dusk. You hear a slow knock from the gate. 3 firm taps. The rhythm of a neighbor, not a guest. You don't need to answer. It's probably a shared water check or someone returning a borrowed sieve. The culture of hospitality is built into these walls. Visitors expect comfort, and the home always delivers. Even if all you offer is a cup of water and a shaded spot to sit, that's more than enough. And here's the quirky bit. In some neighborhoods, people rated homes based on the temperature of their hospitality. That is, how refreshingly cool your offered sherbet was. Not a joke. You could win subtle social points if your clay jug had a better chill than your neighbor's. Some folks even buried their water pots at different depths to test the perfect level of underground cooling. Your house, of course, wins every time. You glance at the wall again. Just behind it, another clay pipe hums gently. Not audibly, but in that way you feel, like standing beside a refrigerator that never whirs. And that pipe? It's feeding a back room where elder family members are resting. The house isn't just a building, it's an intelligent system tuned to every age, need, and tolerance level. Here's something delightful. In wealthier homes, the walls of sleeping rooms were sometimes lined with hollow clay tubes, not to carry water, but to trap cool air and insulate the room through the night. Like ancient built-in air pillows, you'd lie on a woven mat, and the walls would practically sing a lullaby of stored coolness around you. You roll onto your side, tracing your finger along the pattern in the rug. It's faded, hand-dyed with pomegranate skin and indigo leaves. The design could be geometric, could be floral, could just be the imagination of a 13th century weaver trying to impress her aunt. Either way, it tells a story. Outside, the shadows begin to lean. Dusk is coming. The house breathes again. So do you. The sun is lower now, and you can feel the shift. Not just in the light, but in the mood of the house itself. Everything becomes a little slower, a little quieter, as if the architecture is taking a long exhale after holding its breath all day. You're stretched out on a narrow bench built into the wall, known as a tocht. The stone beneath the cushion still holds a trace of the midday heat, but it's fading, retreating under the influence of the home's patient cooling. Let's talk about evenings in ancient Persian homes and how this was the hour everything clicked into place. When all the design tricks of clay, shade, and airflow work together like a quiet orchestra. You're not alone. Others drift through the home now, their movements as soft as the breeze. A child appears with a small pitcher of rose water to sprinkle on the threshold. Someone else adjusts the woven screens to let in just enough twilight without inviting the heat back. This is a ritual, a kind of household choreography. Everyone knows the steps. Above your head, a gentle creak signals the opening of a high-level vent, a tiny shutter built just beneath the roofline. It's time to release the heat that rose and lingered during the afternoon. That single action, one wooden flap swinging open, might drop the room's temperature by several degrees over the next hour. No sound, no fan, just gravity, convection, and know-how. You walk barefoot into the sardab again. This time it's cooler still. Deliciously so. A thin reed mat has been laid out on the floor, and next to it, a folded cotton sheet. It's where you'll sleep tonight if the heat returns. Down here, wrapped in a faint smell of earth, lime plaster, and something sweet like old bossil, sleep comes like a polite guest. Historians still argue whether these basement spaces were used strictly during summer or served as permanent bedrooms. Some say entire families retreated here in hot months, like burrowing animals with lanterns and lullabies. Others believe the sardab was reserved for the elderly, the fragile, or those with enough status to claim the coolest room first. Either way, it's a space that speaks to the kindness of climate-conscious design. But tonight you return to the courtyard. The stones are no longer burning. You cross barefoot, slow and deliberate, passing the central house, the shallow reflecting pool. The surface is still, perfectly mirroring the first stars. You bend down, cupping some water in your hand, and splash it lightly on your neck. A little gasp, a little relief. Time for dinner. And here's where things get quietly clever again. Persian evening meals weren't heavy or heated. The goal was refreshment, not indulgence. You sit cross-legged around a sofre, a cloth spread on the ground or a low platform. On it, cold yogurt with mint, pickled garlic, grilled vegetables that were cooked earlier and left to cool, maybe some slices of melon chilled in the sardab. Flatbread is torn, not cut, and passed from hand to hand. A clay jug sits nearby, its surface dotted with dew. That's evaporative cooling again at work. These jugs, called zirs, are unglazed on purpose. Water seeps through the clay just enough to evaporate and take some heat with it. The result? Not ice cold, but refreshingly cool. The kind of drink that makes your throat sigh. A cat settles beside you. Someone strums a cedar, a few plucked notes, nothing more. You don't talk much. Words feel like too much effort in this air, in this light. You chew slowly, you lean back, you smile. Above the sky deepens, and now we come to the secret weapon of the Persian evening, the night breeze. This breeze is everything. It's why homes open up at dusk, why doorways are unshuttered, lattice windows cracked, fabric curtains pulled aside. The air, cooled by mountain shadows or desert stillness, moves through the home like a wandering poet. You feel it in your hair, across your arms, along the curve of your neck. It's not forceful, it's polite. The kind of breeze that knows it's a guest. And guess what? The bad gear, the windcatcher, is working backwards now. Earlier it drew hot air out and cooler air down. Now it pulls in the cooler air from above, using the same clever clay tunnels to redistribute freshness room by room. No one's commanding it, it just knows. You wander into a side room, one that opens onto the garden. The walls are cool. The air smells faintly of quince and basil. There's a char bog beyond the window, a four-part garden, symmetrical and symbolic. Even here, the arrangement is practical. Water channels divide the garden in quadrants, not just for aesthetics, but to help irrigate evenly and cool the ground around the house. It's like living inside a breeze that learned geometry. You lie back again, and the stone under you is no longer hot. Just firm, just there. There's a distant voice, someone telling a story in the neighbor's courtyard. You catch snippets, a king who lost his horse. A merchant with a bag of salt. Something about a camel that won't kneel. It fades in and out like a dream you're already inside. Then comes a quirky thought. Some archaeologists believe clay cooling systems were occasionally used to chill perfume pots, meaning elite homes didn't just cool the air, they subtly scented it. That means you might have stepped into a room where rosewater mist was drifting ever so faintly through windcatcher pipes. It's debated, sure. But wouldn't it be lovely? And that's the thing. This house isn't just a structure, it's a rhythm, a body, a soul. Designed not to impress you, but to outlast the sun and lull you into forgetting it was ever hot at all. You stretch, you yawn, you hear a dove coo somewhere in the rafters. The stars blink. And the house, as always, stays cool. You're reclining again, this time on a slightly raised platform near the garden entrance. It's not quite a porch, not quite a room. A kind of in-between space known as an iwan. 3 walls, open on one side, perfectly aligned with the flow of the evening breeze. If homes were poems, the iwan would be the breath between stanzas. This is where the night deepens, where the real cooling begins, not just of the walls and air, but of the world. By now, the house, the reflecting pool, has turned from silver to obsidian. You can't see the water anymore unless the wind ripples it. But you hear it? The gentle glug from a hidden spout, fed by one of the ancient Qanat tunnels running under the house. Remember those? The underground water veins of Persia? Well, they don't sleep. Some qanats were tapped just enough to send water trickling into household pools through gravity alone. No buckets, no pumps, just careful angling and a lifetime of watching shadows. In fact, skilled qanat diggers, called mukanas, were treated like sacred artisans. The job was deadly, but the respect was deep. You let your hand drift off the side of the Iwan, fingertips brushing the cool stone floor, and now you notice something unexpected: a small terracotta pot, half buried in the corner. It looks ordinary, but this was the ancient Persian refrigerator, a zir khaneh, or cool house pot. Here's how it works: food or drink is placed in a pot. That pot is placed in a larger pot filled with damp sand, and the whole thing is set in a drafty corridor. Evaporation cools it. You want chilled dates? This is how you get chilled dates, centuries before refrigeration, with zero emissions and 100% smug energy savings. Some historians argue that the technique may have originated in India or even Egypt, but Persians embraced it with flair. There's even evidence of early clay labels tied to these pots, listing contents and dates, proto-fridge magnets if you squint hard enough. Speaking of food, let's not forget leftovers. Dinner's done. The yogurt's back in its pot, the bread covered with a cloth dampened ever so lightly, the melon rind placed near the courtyard fig tree where it will become compost, or a late-night snack for a lucky cat. You're not throwing anything away. That would offend both your ancestors and the local spirits, who are rumored to favor tidy eaters. Someone brings out a small oil lamp. The flame flickers but doesn't waver. The design is genius. Wide base, narrow top, a little lip to protect the flame from drafts. Not just ambiance, but illumination with airflow in mind. And just as your body begins to slide into that satisfying post-meal inertia, there's a low rumble. Not thunder, not a wagon. Something subtler. The earth giving back its stored heat. See, all day long the walls and floors absorb the sun's fury. But now they begin to release it, slowly, with intention. It's why ancient Persians didn't mind stone furniture or thick mud brick construction. The materials knew how to hold warmth when needed and let go when told, like a grandmother who's ready to stop cooking and finally sit down. You pull a light cotton sheet over your legs. A scent rises from the fabric. Lemongrass, maybe, or just the sun. It was washed this morning and dried on the roof where it flapped like a lazy flag above the city. There's a tiny niche carved into the wall near your bedroll. It holds a clay incense cone, shaped like a flower. You light it. The smoke spirals upward, barely visible in the darkness, carrying with it a faint scent of myrrh and sandalwood. Whether it's for cooling, calming, or just impressing the gods, no one agrees. But it works. This section of the house, the Iwan, begins to hum softly, not in sound, but sensation. The air shifts with such regular rhythm it almost becomes a metronome for your breathing. In with the coolness, out with the memory of heat. In again, out again. Historians still argue whether Iwans were primarily social or practical spaces. Were they designed for guests, evening prayer, secret snacks? The answer is probably yes to all of it. What matters more is that they work, in all seasons, for all moods. A sudden gust lifts the curtain at the end of the hall, and it billows briefly like a sail. Then it settles. You hear a dog bark 2 houses away. A camel grunts in the night. Somewhere, someone sneezes and is answered with a sleepy, "May you be well." You smile. Even your bones feel cooler. And now, the final architectural whisper of the night. Rooftop sleeping. It's not quite time yet, but it's close. The tradition goes like this. When the house has done all it can, and truly it's done a lot, you ascend the narrow stairs to the roof. You bring your sheet, your mat, your dreams. And under the stars, you sleep in open air. The wind is your lullaby. The city's silence your blanket. But not tonight. Tonight you stay in the Iwan, close to the garden, closer to the story. You stretch, you sigh. A fig drops from the tree with a soft plop. The house listens and cools and waits for tomorrow. You wake for just a moment, not from discomfort, but from the silence. That strange velvety hush that only comes in the deepest part of the night when even the air has curled up somewhere to rest. You blink slowly. The Iwan is cloaked in darkness now, the kind that doesn't feel empty but full, as if the night itself has settled over everything, sealing it in calm. You stretch a little beneath your cotton sheet and shift just enough to find the cool side of your pillow. Which, by the way, is also clay. Because why not? That's right. Some wealthier homes had hollow ceramic pillows for especially hot nights. They weren't the softest thing in the world. Think of resting your head on a smooth loaf of bread made from pottery, but they stayed cool and surprisingly helped reduce sweating. If you're the type who flips your pillow 80 times a night, this was your ancient solution. So you lie there, your cheek on chilled ceramic, wondering how the ancient Persians made insomnia feel like a design flaw, not a personal failing. You get up quietly, no reason, just that strange midnight pull. Across the courtyard, the moon casts long shadows through the carved wooden meshrabiyya screens. Remember those? Decorative lattices that control light and airflow, but also provide privacy. You're framed by geometry, little squares and stars and flowers dancing in moonlight. The breeze moves through them like a whisper slipping between teeth. And then, there it is. The rooftop stairs. You take them. Bare feet, cool stone, one hand trailing along the wall. Each step a little cooler than the last. You reach the top, and it's like walking into a different world. The city is asleep but not still. Cats weave between chimneys. A pair of pigeons coo somewhere beneath a parapet. Far off, a man coughs, then is quiet. You roll out your mat on the roof. You're not alone. Other sleeping bundles dot the surface like sleepy turtles. It was normal in ancient Persia for entire families to sleep on the roof during summer. Some even built low walls or windbreaks to make rooftop rooms, semi-private areas where you could sleep, gossip, or watch the stars with someone you weren't quite allowed to court yet. You lie down again. The wind is steady now. Not fierce, not cold. Just steady. It smells of dust and distant trees and a little smoke from someone's banked fire. You imagine the entire city breathing at the same pace. And now the stars. You count 5, then 20, then lose track. The night sky here has never been polluted, not by gas, not by neon, not by emails glowing at 2 a.m. Just space and stars and stories. You remember hearing a tale earlier in the evening, something about the myth of the wind's origin. It goes like this. In the beginning, the world was too still. The gods grew bored, so they tied a child's laughter to a bird's wings and sent it across the sky. Wherever it flew, the air followed. That was wind. A joke, a joy, a gift. And the bad gears, those towering windcatchers you learned about earlier, they're said to catch the laughter still. They don't just guide the breeze, they hold a little bit of joy in their clay throats. Historians scoff at this. They want diagrams and measurable flow rates, but you're fine believing a house can laugh, especially when it's laughing with you, not at you. Somewhere nearby, you hear the creak of another rooftop door. A neighbor heading up maybe, or someone going back down for a forgotten blanket. This is the intimacy of warm climates. Architecture without secrets, sound without shame. You sit up briefly and glance across the rooftops. You notice a line of clay pots near a chimney, each with a rag tied around its neck. These are nighttime water traps, placed out to collect condensation or catch a bit of that morning dew. It won't be much, but it's symbolic, a kind of domestic optimism. Back down in the Sardab, The last of the daytime heat is finally gone. The house has done its job. Without wires. Without worrying. Without any arrogance at all. Just clay, air, and the patience of people who watch the sun long enough to understand how to ignore it. You think for a moment about the word sustainability. It's a modern buzzword now, plastered across tote bags and tech expos. But here, under the stars, with a breeze in your hair and a cooling pot of water by your mat, it doesn't feel like a concept. It feels like common sense. Like breathing in rhythm with the seasons. Like building homes that know things. One last note before you drift again. Some scholars have argued that these Persian cooling systems may have been exported or adapted by other cultures via the Silk Roads. Windcatcher-like structures appear in parts of Egypt, Pakistan, even along the Red Sea coast. Did they copy the designs? Reinvent them independently? Or did some clever traveler pass through one night, sleep like a baby, and think, we need one of these back home? No one agrees, but it doesn't matter. The knowledge moved, like wind, like stories, like the dream you're about to have. You close your eyes. The clay beneath you is firm. The sky above you is velvet. And all around, the ancient city exhales again. Cool, content, and completely at peace. You wake up with the gentlest of cues. Not an alarm, not a rooster, just the hush shifting. There's something about the pre-dawn wind that feels different. Lighter, cooler still, almost like it's tiptoeing across the rooftops to see who's ready for morning. You sit up slowly, blanket sliding off your shoulders, and you feel the first fingers of dawn brushing against the eastern sky. Everything is a deep, dusty blue. Somewhere far off, the mosque's call to prayer begins. Not a loud summons, but a melody curling through the still air like the wind is humming. And just like that, it's time to begin again. You stretch your arms. The stone beneath you is still cool, still holding the echo of last night's breeze. But already the temperature is shifting. You don't need a thermometer. You can feel it in your skin. The wind is about to change direction. The house knows it. The city knows it. And so do you. Back down the stairs you go, careful not to wake the others. You duck into the sardab one more time, greeting it like an old friend. It's darker now. Sunlight hasn't yet made it into the air shaft, but cooler too. You check the water pot, still chilled. You sip. It tastes like clay and moonlight. And now it's time for the morning reset. Here's where the true genius of the Persian passive cooling cycle shows itself. Everything that worked overnight is now reversed, subtly, patiently. Windows that face the night wind are now closed to keep the new heat out. Curtains are drawn but not sealed, just enough to block the glare while letting the shadows dance on the walls. And the floors? You'd think they'd be warm by now. But no, not yet. They're still cool from the night, still holding their secret against the coming sun. You remember those ceramic pillows again? Maybe you chuckle. Maybe you wonder why you've ever slept on anything else. There's something oddly intimate about preparing a house for heat. You're not fighting it, you're accommodating it. It's like preparing for a guest you've hosted 100 times before. One who always overstays their welcome, but whom you've learned to live with. Summer heat in Persia is not an enemy, it's a relative. And you can't just yell at relatives. You have to build them a room and hope they stay mostly quiet. The bad gears begin to shift too. Their tall necks catch the changing winds, and the cooler air from the shaded side of the house is now coaxed downward. Not forced, not fanned, just gently persuaded by physics and design. Like everything in this house, it happens slowly. You pass through the kitchen again. The fire pit is cleaned, the ashes swept aside and dampened. In a corner, someone is grinding cardamom and black tea, the scent curling like smoke through the early rooms. The smell alone seems to cool the air, or maybe it just cools the mind. Historians still debate whether these cooling methods were standardized across the region or developed locally based on terrain and wealth. Some cities, like Yazd, became famous for their maze-like layout, which funneled wind into tighter corridors. Others relied more on subterranean tricks and courtyard depth. But no matter the method, the philosophy was the same. Let nature do the work. Just help it a little, and help it you do. You take a bucket of leftover well water, slightly warm from being above ground, and splash a little on the courtyard tiles. Not much, just enough. The water disappears almost instantly, but not without releasing one last sigh of coolness. A kind of thank you for not wasting it. You sit near the garden, rubbing your palm against the now damp stone. It's oddly satisfying, cooler to the touch than you'd expect. That's evaporative cooling, the same principle behind those desert windcatchers, those pot-in-pot refrigerators, even the very sweat beating on your neck. The desert doesn't cool through force, it cools through patience. A bee flits past, early and disoriented. It's headed toward the fig blossoms, unaware of how perfect the air feels right now. Not hot yet, not dry, just right. The liminal moment between night and day. Someone across the street opens their shutters. You hear a gentle clatter, maybe tea glasses, maybe a broom. And you realize something remarkable. You've gone an entire day without artificial cooling, and not once did you wish for an air conditioner. You remember your own home now, back in the noisy, humming, beeping present. The AC unit mounted like a mechanical wart. The fan with its plastic arms. The windows that don't open because they're sealed in a battle against themselves. But here, clay, wind, and water. That's all it took. Oh, and knowledge. Generations of it. Passed down through mud bricks and story and gesture. A child watches a grandmother open a vent just so. A builder tests a courtyard's angles by watching a candle flame. A family learns to listen to the walls, to time their meals with the shadows, to build with the sun instead of against it. You rise now, moving through the rooms once more. The house feels awake but not rushed. It stretches, much like you did, accepting the sun with grace. The light spills through the mashrabia, making lace patterns on the wall. The house glitters again, and somewhere behind a shutter, someone is tuning a cedar. A soft note drifts through the breeze, then fades. And just like that, the passive cooling cycle has begun its next loop. No electricity, no fuss, just timeless rhythm. You lie back down in the Iwan, if only for a moment. Your body already misses the rooftop air, the clay beneath your head, the sound of the water pot dripping in the dark. But this is how it works. Cool by night, shield by day, breath by breath. You rest for a moment longer in the shaded Iwan, half dozing in the mid-morning hush. The sun is out in full now, but it doesn't rush into the courtyard. It's filtered, fractured, broken into patterns by wooden screens and leafy vines. You reach out and trace the shadow of a grape leaf across the floor with your fingertip. This is the part of the day where the architecture earns its keep. The real heat is coming. It will be relentless. The roof tiles will sizzle. The outer walls will warm like oven bricks. But in here, you'll barely notice. And that's not an accident. This was Thermal Mass 101, Persian edition. The thick adobe walls weren't just walls. They were time machines for heat. They absorbed the day's warmth slowly, held it like a secret, then released it late at night when the air was cool again. Not instantly, not dramatically, just enough. Like a whisper you remember hours later. By midday, the outer surfaces of the house will be scorching. But inside the sardab, still cool. You step down into it once more. Not because you have to, but because you can. This is your refuge, your built-in cave, and it's working like a charm. Historians still argue whether this style of home design was passed down from the Achaemenids or evolved during the Islamic Golden Age. Some even believe it reflects Zoroastrian cosmology, emphasizing balance, harmony, and respect for elemental forces: fire, water, earth, air. All four have their place in this system. None dominates. Even the fire of the sun is managed, respected, and redirected, not resisted. Back upstairs, you glance at a wall niche, a muqarnas, carved into cascading stalactite-like shapes. They're beautiful, yes, but also functional. The tiered design helps trap and slow warm air, nudging it upward and outward instead of letting it settle around you. Even beauty here is practical. Even ornament serves the body. You hear a soft shuffle. The children next door are awake now. One of them drags a cloth across the floor, sweeping without being told. Another scoops cool water into their palms and gently wets the stone doorstep. They've been taught, quietly, gently. This is not chores, it's part of the day. Like brushing your teeth or breathing. And here's the thing. The entire household moves differently because of the cooling strategy. Midday isn't for activity, it's for stillness. The busiest rooms, like the kitchen or bathhouse, are either used early in the morning or later in the evening. Between noon and 3, the house contracts, quiets. People nap in shaded corners, write letters on glazed tiles, or listen to stories told in low voices while the air hangs heavy with the scent of mint and dust. The badgers continue to do their silent work, tall and smug against the noon sun. Every so often, a dove perches on one, cooing into the mouth like it's whispering a joke to the wind. You go into the central living area, passing through a curtain made of strings and beads, the kind that tinkle softly when you walk through. Even these have a purpose. They mark zones of coolness and motion. In older homes, strings soaked in scented water were sometimes hung across entrances, cooling the air as it passed through them. Lavender, rosewater, or myrtle, whatever was available. And it's worth noting, scents were part of the cooling process. Not in temperature, but in feeling. A drop of rosewater on the wrist, a breeze infused with basil or vinegar-soaked cloth. Your brain relaxes. Your body believes it's cooler. Ancient Persian architecture didn't separate function from feeling. Cooling was physical, but also emotional. You recline now, sipping sherbet made from sour cherry and ice stored from last winter. Remember the yakchal? That conical ice pit we visited? You think about it now with new appreciation. Somewhere, buried beneath a domed mound of earth and straw, a block of mountain snow is slowly melting just so you can have a chilled drink in the desert. Luxury? Not really. More like long-term planning with style. A neighbor stops by bringing a bowl of dates and a sly smile. She leans against the doorframe, careful to stay in the shadow, and chats about nothing for a while. How the mulberries are sweeter this year, how her clay pots cracked less than usual. And then she's gone, her sandals whispering against the tile. You rest your eyes again. And in that moment, you remember another scholarly argument. Some historians believe Persian cooling wasn't just practical, it was philosophical. A response to scarcity, yes, but also a worldview. One where comfort didn't mean control, but collaboration. With nature, with time, with the elements. There's something humbling about that. Modern cooling is loud, instant, artificial. It treats heat like an intruder. But ancient cooling was quiet, patient. It treated heat like a season, a fact of life. Something to be danced with, not defeated. And as the day reaches its hottest point, you lie there in total comfort. No buzz, no whir. Just thick walls, smart design, and the oldest form of elegance. Restraint. You don't need to move. You don't even need to think. The house is doing the thinking for you. Centuries of trial and error, passed down through blueprints written in shadows and breeze paths. You are not in charge here, but you are taken care of, and that's the point. As the afternoon drifts slowly into evening, you notice the change again. The sun's harsh glare softens, the shadows stretch longer, and the air carries a faint promise of relief. The desert doesn't cool quickly, but it cools surely. You step outside and feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, a slow heat that lingers but no longer burns. The house seems to breathe along with you. The thick adobe walls have soaked up the day's heat, holding it quietly, almost respectfully, waiting to release it when the time is right. You recall the layout of the house, the central courtyard filled with a shallow pool of water. The house, its surface shimmering under the last golden rays. The water's presence isn't just decorative, it's a crucial part of the cooling cycle, evaporating moisture into the air and gently lowering the temperature. The courtyard is alive with the sounds of evening, the soft chirping of crickets, the distant murmur of the marketplace settling down, the occasional flutter of birds returning to roost. Somewhere nearby, a cat pads quietly across the tiled floor, its paws barely making a sound. You make your way back inside, feeling the cooler air drawn down by the badgers, those graceful windcatchers that crown the roof like silent sentinels. They stand tall, catching the evening breezes and funneling them down into the home, pushing out the warm air and inviting in the freshness. The cycle is almost complete. Tonight, the house will cool again, just as it did last night and every night before. The rhythm is steady and sure, warm by day, cool by night. Clay pipes, water pools, thick walls, and clever vents all working together in perfect harmony. You think about the ingenuity required to design such homes without electricity or modern technology. It's a quiet genius born of necessity and patience, passed down through generations. Historians still debate how much of this knowledge was shared across regions versus developed locally, but one thing is clear. The Persian approach to cooling was both practical and elegant, blending architecture with nature seamlessly. As darkness falls, you lie back down on your clay pillow, the soft murmur of the water pot dripping nearby, soothing your senses. The house hums quietly, alive with coolness and calm. You close your eyes and feel yourself drifting off, carried gently by centuries of wisdom and the soft whisper of the desert night. You probably won't survive a day in a modern apartment with no AC, but here, in this house, you don't have to. The night welcomes you. Now, as your breathing slows and the day fades into a gentle memory, imagine the house resting with you. Its thick walls cooling slowly, its pools still shimmering faintly in the moonlight. The desert night stretches wide and silent, wrapped in the soft blanket of stars. Your body and mind begin to ease, the warmth replaced by a comforting coolness, as if you're cradled by the earth itself. No hurried noises, no electric hums, just the slow rhythm of natural cycles, the whisper of wind through ancient clay, and the quiet promise of a peaceful night. Let this timeless calm settle deep within you, inviting rest and gentle dreams. Feel the steady pulse of a world that moves slowly, patiently, always in harmony with the seasons. Breathe deeply now and let the soft air carry you into sleep. Sweet dreams.